So yesterday was Ash Wednesday, and I was in Auschwitz. I was in Auschwitz with about 150 teachers. It was a long day. Left the house at 3 a.m., got back at 1:30 a.m., obviously the following morning. So these are my first reflections on that. So not very tidy. I'm out walking with my dog Libby and just unpacking really the following morning. Get your thoughts as well, really. Because I don't know what I think and feel. You can imagine the day after that. I don't quite know. You've not really processed it. So I'm doing that with you today. I learned so much that I didn't know. I thought I knew about the Holocaust, about the killing of the 6 million Jews and also the genocide of maybe 500,000 of persecuted other people. There was so much I don't know. And I met people who every day learn something new, who live and breathe knowing about and telling the stories and the testimonies of the Holocaust. Every day they're learning new things. And so not only did I learn new things, but I also realized I'm like just the tip of the iceberg of knowing of one, perhaps the most recorded genocides in human history. And I thought about how, I mean, it's obvious, but how, Hitler was responsible for the killing of 6 million Jews, but he didn't kill 6 million Jews. That it was the Coast Guard in Greece, it was the train driver in Hungary. It was the queue of business leaders and businessmen who rented slaves from the concentration camps all around Europe in order to turn a profit. And that was one of the things that really struck me, not the wide-ranging culpability, that struck me too, but the way institutions were so involved. People talk about religion as the cause of violence, and I don't want to dismiss that. The church, the Catholic Church, for example, made a secret deal we've since discovered with Hitler around Hitler not uncovering the abuses of the church, the child abuse and so on of the church, if the church kept quiet about the murdering of Jews. And so, the Catholic Church was deliberately culpable and could have resisted. And if the Catholic Church had resisted Hitler, none of that would have happened. I think they had the power, it had the people on the ground, could have stopped the Holocaust. Same with business leaders. Business leaders could have stopped the Holocaust, but they shrugged their shoulders and turned a profit. And the culpability of business institutions, of industry in the genocide, like Hitler could not have done it without big business, without people saying, well, this is just how business is done now. This is the new leader. This is the new regime. We've just got to go with it. And they didn't have to go with it. I learned as well that the guards at the concentration camp, the guards at the gas chambers, were given the choice not to work there. They didn't have to work. They were like, some of them said, well, I don't want to. And they were just reassigned to other places. That they made a choice to work there. And that so much of my thinking about the Holocaust was that people did terrible things at the barrel of a gun, that they weren't given a choice. And that was what Eichmann said, the guy who ran the trains, the guy who organized really the whole thing. He said, well, I had to do it. It wasn't true of any of those people. It was true of the prisoners, of the capos and so on. It was true of them. They were at the barrel of a gun. But of the civilians, of the soldiers, of the SS, of all of those, it wasn't true. There was no guns to their heads. They just shrugged their shoulders and said, this is how it's done now. And this is how the system is. So I was struck by, people's culpability. And there was more of that than I realized. And I was struck by institutions wanting to preserve themselves, whether it's the market institutions, big business, whether it's the religious institutions, the church, whether it's civil society and the state itself, preserving of institutions forever, the idea that I have built this organized people and money and it has to be preserved at all costs, that I think caused so much evil. And every time we have an institution or an organization that the purpose of it becomes its preservation rather than the thing it was supposed to do, evil comes soon after. And that every institution, I think, should have within its purpose its own ending. Every healthy institution should be, as my friend Al says, compostable. that when we build anything, when we organize people, we should think, and when will we end this, and build that into it. And when we don't, when we think we've built a beautiful, good and wonderful thing, and we have to keep it going, trustees of charities and organizations and institutions, that we're responsible for keeping this wonderful thing that we've built forever, then we end up with something bad and evil, because it ends up being at the cost of, say, staff or people on the outside. So yeah, the self-preservation of institutions and the role of that in the Holocaust really struck me yesterday. I was also struck by, so when my dad died many years ago, and my brothers and sister and my mum and I were around his bedside after he died, and I was kind of holding it together like you do. And I was asked to put away his personal effects, his wallet and his phone and his watch, put it in the drawer, I think. And just picking those up, and that's when I fell apart. That's when I started crying, holding his personal effects. And we were told yesterday to think of stories, and we were given pictures and names and stories of people, and it still felt a bit like something in a textbook for me. Like I remained my toxic male, buttoned up self as we looked at those stories. But when we went in the rooms with the mountain of suitcases and the piles of shoes, and also just tons and tons of human hair, women's hair that had been cut and shaved off and was being sold to be used for matting and rope. When we went in those rooms with people's personal effects right there in front of me, that's when I was struck the most by it. And there's something about the little possessions that we own that tells our stories, I think, that is deeply moving. The impermanence of our lives when we have things that we leave behind, like those suitcases that survive those people who didn't survive. One final thing that struck me was about how people going even to the gas chambers, and even to the very last moment, genuinely believing they were going for a shower, and how at each stage of the journey, people were lied to. And that as they were put on the trains and sent to the concentration camps, places like Auschwitz, they were told, you're going to a temporary place before we send you to like a new settlement, like some land where you can live and build your life and rebuild your family. And as they went to the showers, they were told, the gas chambers, they were told, oh, put your things here, mark them, make sure you remember which hook you put your clothes on so you can come and get it afterwards. Here's your soap. People were conned all along the way. And how absolutely all of us would have been conned and are being conned all the time. And I think that's the key learning here of that. We can all be conned. And that they were told, and this is the thing that struck me the most about this, the fact that they were told that you were going to a new place to live, we're just displacing you. They were never told, obviously, we were going to murder you. They said, we're going to displace you. And then you'll get somewhere new to live, which is exactly what's being said to Palestinians today by Donald Trump in Gaza. We're just displacing you. That struck me, that lie is still being told by leaders today. And we don't want to believe terrible things of people, so we choose to believe the nice lie instead of the terrible truth all the time. We prefer to believe the nice lie than the terrible truth. At the end of the day, we were told about the power of education and how important education is. And I don't want to say it isn't, I'm a teacher. But education is a theory of change, the idea that education changes the world. And somebody, a Jewish leader said to us, like, education was the only thing that would change. And we were to go out and tell people about the Holocaust and tell the story, and that's how we were going to change the world. And it struck me that theory of change doesn't hold with observable reality. We need to do a hell of a lot more than just tell the truth. We have to get out there and do stuff. Knowledge isn't power. Knowledge is only power when you do something with it. And there's no point us knowing. We don't learn from history. We learn from taking action today in the light of history. And I think if I want to take anything away in terms of where I go next with learning about this, then it's that knowledge isn't power. Power is when you do something with knowledge. And we don't learn from history. We learn from taking action in the light of history.